Neurotransmitters are extremely important in everyday functions. They are used to send signals in between cells. This is how your neurons communicate with each other to produce a response. There are many different types of neurotransmitters and different categories of neurotransmitters as well. These different neurotransmitters have difference in function due to their differences in structure. One of the most important neurotransmitters is acetylcholine. It is one of the most well-known and most researched neurotransmitters. Acetylcholine was actually the first neurotransmitter ever discovered. Acetylcholine is synthesized by choline acetyltransferase and is an ester of acetic acid and choline. Okay, so now I'm going to show you how acetylcholine is actually formed by drawing the mechanism. First, the oxygen from choline donates its pair of electrons to the hydrogen of acetic acid. The bond between this hydrogen and the oxygen breaks, leaving the oxygen with the electrons from that bond. The oxygen from the choline, now with two hydrogens, leaves the choline molecule as water, breaking the bond and taking the electrons with it. Now, the remaining portion of the choline compound has a carbocation. This is highly reactive, and so the oxygen from acetic acid donates a lone pair to the carbocation. And acetylcholine is formed. Acetylcholine is an excitatory neurotransmitter in skeletal muscle and can be excitatory or inhibitory at other sites. An excitatory neurotransmitter is a neurotransmitter that increases the chance of an action potential occurring. And inhibitory means it decreases the likelihood of an action potential occurring. So what does acetylcholine actually do in the brain? In the autonomic nervous system, acetylcholine is essential in muscle movement. In the central nervous system, acetylcholine controls arousal, attention, and motivation. To communicate with other cells, a cell will release a neurotransmitter into the synaptic cleft. The neurotransmitter will then diffuse across the synaptic cleft and bind to receptors on the next neuron. Each neurotransmitter is selective only to certain receptors. Acetylcholine has two types of receptors, nicotinic and muscarinic. Nicotinic receptors are on neurons and muscarinic are on smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, and glands. So now that acetylcholine has diffused across the synaptic cleft, there needs to be something to stop the signal. To do this, acetylcholinesterase breaks down acetylcholine, which stops the signal. Acetylcholinesterase breaks down acetylcholine through hydrolysis. Water is added to acetylcholine, which breaks it up into the original compounds of acetic acid and choline. So we know that neurotransmitters are specific to certain receptors, but are receptors specific to only certain neurotransmitters? No. There can be agonists and antagonists that can bind to receptors. Agonists stimulate those receptors and act as if acetylcholine was binding there. An example of this is nicotine. Nicotine binds to nicotinic receptors and acts like acetylcholine. How does structure allow for this? Antagonists bind to the receptors and block the effects of acetylcholine. Examples of this are curare and atropine. Curare blocks acetylcholine by binding to nicotinic receptors, preventing acetylcholine from binding there. And atropine blocks acetylcholine by binding to muscarinic receptors. Atropine has some similarities to acetylcholine, which allows atropine to bind to acetylcholine receptors. In both molecules, the ester and the nitrogen are located in similar positions. This is also true for curare. So this here is the structure of curare. The structure of acetylcholine is shown in red. You can see that embedded into this molecule is the structure of acetylcholine. So this similarity in structure is what allows curare to act like acetylcholine to actually bind to acetylcholine receptors. So what is the importance of acetylcholine? Not only is acetylcholine essential to brain activity and communication, it is also involved in Alzheimer's and even Botox. In patients with Alzheimer's, there are low levels of acetylcholine. The acetylcholine pathways are important for learning and memory. Therefore, Alzheimer's patients have trouble remembering. One way of treating these patients is to block acetylcholinesterase. Inhibiting acetylcholine esterase means it can't break down acetylcholine, which means there's more acetylcholine available, which improves learning and memory. Also, Botox is used to treat some muscular conditions or to remove the appearance of wrinkles. A very small concentration, as to not produce deadly effects, of botulinum toxin is ejected into the skin. This prevents the release of acetylcholine. Since acetylcholine is needed for muscle contraction, the botulinum toxin paralyzes the muscles and gets rid of wrinkles.